Welcome to House Ag and Natural Resources Budget. Are there any bill introductions? First up, we're going to work the Board of Accountancy budget. Does anybody have anything they'd like to speak about on the budget? Did you have any comments on working the budget? Anything you wanted to add, or no? We're doing accountancy. Okay. You want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chairman. But before I do that, can I just mention something yesterday that we received information today on the question, I think research sent it out to us on the statutes dealing with boards and payment of boards. That is a mess. And I don't know if we can put a comment or that needs to be totally looked at, combined, some consistency of board payments and increase the payments of those board members. But I don't know if we can just put them, Victoria, if we can put something in our response to that issue, because it needs to be looked at by someone. But
Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On that same line, I did some investigation. Some of those boards are advisory only. They really don't have any authority. So there's a different level of expectations. So we need to investigate that also at the same time. Thank you.
Good point. With that, Mr. Chairman, I would go ahead and the committee accept the governor's recommendations or the Board of Accountancy or their budget for 2021-2022.
I'll second that motion. Well, that's great. We're going to move on to the next one then. Oh, sorry. Those in favor of sending the budget as reported, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passed. The next budget we're going to work today is the Department of Commerce. Does anybody have, we have some great people here. Does anybody have any questions while we've got the man here? Commerce budget. Well, we're going to look at it. Representative Carlin.
I move we pass out the Commerce Department budget, favorable for passage. Now we can work it.
I've got a question. If you have for Dave. So my question is, yesterday you were talking about tourism headed to commerce, and if I saw that right, it looked like it fully wouldn't be implemented, you didn't think, till July 1?
That would be correct, yes. It would have to take place as of the beginning of the next fiscal year.
So the question I'd have for you, there's about $4 million tied to that move. I'd like to make is it a motion or amendment that we cut that 4 million in half? That's half the budget. Half of it's still going to stay over there probably in tourism, unless you got to go ahead, Dave.
Sorry, if I may, so that 4 million is all tied to FY '22 when the move would take place. It would happen immediately as of July 1st, so all that 4 million would be available to Commerce, and then the move would take place July 1st. We'd be getting ready for it to all happen in FY '21, and then as of the start of FY '22, it would happen, and that's the only money that's being talked about. We're not talking about any FY '21 money.
So just asking you this. So
Sure.
when, Wildlife and Parks comes with their budget, do you think they'll have an item for the moving for them too?
No, so there's a $10,000 SGF for the physical move itself. That's budgeted already, but otherwise, all monies for them would be in FY '21. They will have to show $0 in FY '22.
Any questions or comments? Representative Hahn?
So then, Mr. Speaker, so I actually talked to the Speaker of the House yesterday, and I asked him about that move. I'm not favorable for that move. So what is protocol if we don't want, if that hasn't happened yet and we haven't voted on that yet, then do we go ahead and pass that budget since that's still part of that? Or do we pass it contingent upon it moving, or how?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Victoria Potts with Legislative Research. This committee did not want to move the budget for Department of Commerce, you would decrease their budget by 4 million and 12 people. And then when we did Wildlife and Parks, you would add that back to give them $4 million and 12 people to undo the move if you didn't want to move tourism from Wildlife and Parks to Commerce.
I would just say that we want to approve the budget, but take out 4.6. Okay. Thank you.
No, 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 no.
Yes, sir, I sure do. So I move until we know what's going to happen, until we know what's going to happen with tourism. I move that we subtract this 4.6 million plus these FTE positions away from this budget. And if it does pass that we move tourism to commerce, then we'll add it to the budget. Can we do that? Can we add it then? Great.
I ask a question of Victoria.
The motion is that we subtract on page 40, $4,616,214, as well as the FTE positions of 12 away from this budget, approve the commerce budget minus this 4.6 million. If it passes and tourism indeed merges into commerce, then we give them that budget then.
Representative Carlin, did you have something to say?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Victoria, I'm unsure. Is this move happening in the budget process that we are in right now, or is there a bill to move it?
There is an ERO. That's the legislation that's required to move commerce, for tourism to commerce, excuse me. So that ERO is currently referred to House Commerce, and they will, if they want to, they can hold a hearing on that ERO. They don't have to. No action by House Commerce would be accepting the ERO, meaning that tourism would move to commerce, or House Commerce Committee can meet and say that they disapprove the ERO, in which case it would move to the floor and be voted on the floor.
So this motion would be a proviso type motion, not a proviso, but a motion that in the event that it does not pass on the floor or through the system. I'm just trying to follow what she's going to actually do.
Correct. Correct, sorry. Yeah, so it would be, sorry, I was checking with Dylan. Be dependent on the ERO being disapproved in House Commerce. I'm hoping that's right, Dylan.
And it's ERO 48.
Yes, 48.
If it's disapproved in House Commerce, then it has to be voted on the floor?
Come on up and bail us out of this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's really a parallel process going on here. There's an executive reorganization order. There's an executive reorganization order that's modifying the names of the agency and the underlying statutes and everything like that. And there's a budgetary appropriation process, okay, that's going on at the same time. And so what this recommendation would do is reject the budget of moving them from one place to the other, but has no impact on the law changes, which are part of ERO 48. And I would just like to clarify, so everybody knows, it has to be affirmatively denied by either the House or the Senate. So it's going to happen unless there's action taken by the House or Senate to say, no, we do not want this to happen. And that could be like resolutions and stuff like that. There's a variety of options to stop it, but that's the way it sort of works.
Representative Garber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the other thing we need to understand here, and I think we probably do, we're making this recommendation to full appropriations. They don't have to accept it. They can put it back in. So.
Representative Baker.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my question is, what's the objection? Why are we doing this?
I need some time to talk to my constituents. Where we live, tourism is a big deal, and I'm just not sure moving it out of wildlife and parks is the best move. So I just need some time to research that and figure out if I'm fully on board with that or not.
Representative Garber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if we take the $4 million out, it really then prevents the funding of this moving forward in the Commerce Department. Separating the ERO, that's a separate situation, as Dylan has already expressed and explained to us. And I understand Representative Garber, his point that, yes, appropriations could put the money back in if they feel so, if they feel that way. But when you really think about it, the Appropriations Committee is mainly made up of, I would guess, a number of people that maybe don't feel like it's a good idea to move commerce from ag to, or wildlife and parks to commerce. So with that said, I'm going to have to oppose this. I still think it's the appropriate move. You look in the past in tourism when they were in commerce, I think they did a much better job of marketing the state, and no reflection on wildlife and parks, but I think it's appropriate, so I will oppose your motion.
So, Representative Hahn, would you repeat your amendments?
Sure. I move that we remove $4,616,214 in addition to the 12 FTE positions from this budget contingent upon tourism being moved from wildlife and parks into commerce. And if it is, then we'll add it back. Can we do that process? Is that, because it,
Representative Carlin?
Thank you. I too oppose this motion, and I understand your position of being new, and maybe you didn't hear about this all summer, but I did, and I know that I've been on this committee for 12 years, maybe or more, and I've seen it in both places. And when it was sent to Wildlife and Parks, it really wasn't enjoyed. Wildlife and Parks didn't really, my opinion, it seems they didn't really want it. And we had an inactive Commerce Department at the time that was being run by people that really didn't pay any attention to their job. And we've had to rebuild the Commerce Department. We've got a very active and successful department going right now. And so that's where the energy is for making money off of business. And it's not the same in ag and wildlife and parks. I mean, they have to look at roads and ponds and lakes and fishing and hunting, and that's where their interest is. And it does work both ways, but I really believe the energy and the marketing and the contact with the public is really energized right now with commerce, and I think it's a wonderful idea, and I just have to oppose the motion. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Is there any more discussion? Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got a question, and you might be able to help answer it. Even if we do pass this, and at the time that the Senate or the House does not approve it, this part of the budget would not be into commerce then anyways.
Chairman, if they were to reject, if the legislature would reject it, then we would adjust, it would subsequently adjust the budget. There would probably be a motion taken during conference or something like that to conform the budget to the will of the legislature. But since all of the statutory underpinning portions of the move had been rejected, okay, there would probably be an action taken by either the House or Senate during the conference process to conform it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more discussion? Oh.
so,
Representative Hahn?
yes, sir. So just to follow up with you then on that. So does the money follow tourism? It just, I mean, it would follow. That's just really my main concern. I just want the money to follow, whether it's in commerce or wildlife and parks. I just want that money to follow.
So there's two buckets, and I don't want to make this more complicated than it has to be. Okay, I really don't. But there is actually
Like
two
I've already
buckets of
done
money.
that. Sorry about that.
That's not a problem. There's actually two buckets of money. There's some special revenue funds, and there's EDIF. Okay, the EDIF really would take appropriations actions to move. But then there's special revenue funds that if you look inside the body of the ERO, actually moves the fund into the Department of Commerce. But for the most part, I'll say yes, for the purpose of simplicity, is it will follow the ERO. I hope I didn't make it more complicated.
Mr. Chair, so if that is indeed the case and those funds follow wherever tourism were to go, if that indeed is true, then I withdraw my motion.
So was there a motion, a second to pass? Okay. For passing the budget out? Okay. Is there any other discussion about moving the commerce budget out of this committee?
Mr. Chairman, this is John Alcala. So the motion has been withdrawn, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
The amendment.
Right, right.
We're back where we started when he came in the door. So, if there's no more discussion, let's all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Budget's approved and moving out. Thanks. Let's see, what's next? Commerce. Oh, yeah, aye. Now let's open the hearing on the Department of Ag budget. Victoria, are you doing it? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I will be presenting the Department of Agriculture's budget. You should have a copy of it in front of you on white paper. So as you have probably picked up on by now, through the budget analysis, the first few pages are just overview information, and we'll skip straight to the detail of it. And the detail for this budget starts on page 8. On page 8, I'm looking underneath the box toward the bottom of the page. The agency estimates revised fiscal year 2021 expenditures of $55.9 million, including $9.8 million SGF. This is an all funds increase of $3.7 million and a state general fund decrease of $464 from the fiscal year 2021 approved amount. I would note that the revised estimate includes reappropriations of $2.8 million from the State Water Plan Fund. Just a reminder that reappropriations are money spent in fiscal year 2020 that the agency did not spend, and those roll over into the next fiscal year. Turning the page to page 9 so that we can look at that all funds increase a little bit closer. On page 9, the all funds increase is found mostly in two main categories. That first is contractual services, so that's that second bullet on page 9. And the increase in contractual services is primarily due to those state water plan fund reappropriations I just mentioned, so rollover funds that the agency is allowed to spend in the next fiscal year. You can see major programs listed at about halfway through the contractual services paragraph: stream bank stabilization, non-point source pollution assistance, and basin management. The second big category that's causing the increase in fiscal year 2021 is other assistance. That's that last bullet toward the bottom. And again, that other assistance increase is mostly caused by state water plan fund reappropriations. It's also caused by the agency's supplemental request for the Kansas Reservoir Protection Initiative, and we'll talk about that supplemental on the next page. But before we turn there, that last paragraph on page 9, the governor recommends 2021 expenditures of $57.4 million, including $9.4 million state general fund. This is an all funds increase of $1.5 million and a state general fund decrease of $420,000 from the agency's revised estimate. That all funds increase is due to increased expenditures from the agency's coronavirus relief fund. Originally, funds for the Food Stability Assistance Program, which you actually heard about in Department of Commerce's budget yesterday, they were appropriated to the Department of Commerce, but some of those were transferred to this Department of Agriculture so that they could appropriate those funds. So not the entire amount, just $2.8 million. And that was after the agency submitted its budget, which is why the governor added it in. As a reminder, that program provides assistance to facilities like meat processing, food producers, to stabilize a food supply chain. And so those facilities can increase capacity, perform capital improvements to help stabilize the food supply chain. And so that's the increase caused by the governor's recommendation. Turning to the next page, page 10. The governor also recommended a 5% shrinkage rate for the agency. I know you're going to ask me, what does shrinkage mean? Because everyone does. So shrinkage is the difference between the cost of fully funding the agency's salary and wages. So if every position was filled for the entire year, and then you subtract how much is not spent due to vacancies or turnover, that difference, that's shrinkage. So the governor has recommended that the agency implement a 5% shrinkage rate, so basically save 5% and not spend it. Shrinkage is weird, I know. And then I also wanted to note the governor's recommendation also includes a proposed allotment from the state water plan fund of $1.2 million. What that means is the governor over the summer requested that the Department of Agriculture not spend $1.2 million from the state water plan fund. And that is part of the governor's recommendation for fiscal year 2021. So still on page 10, sorry, still on page 10, looking at the box in the middle, supplementals. The agency has requested 2 supplementals totaling $1 million, all from special revenue funds. That first one is the one I mentioned earlier, the Kansas Reservoir Protection Program for $820,000 from the State Water Plan Fund. This program provides financial assistance to landowners above federal reservoirs to implement sediment-reducing conservation practices. In the approved budget, this money was appropriated to the Water Office, but it's being transferred to the Department of Agriculture so that they can handle those applications and handing out that money. The second supplemental that you'll see is $212,000 from the Coronavirus Relief Fund for expenditures on communication services and PPE. And the governor did recommend both of these enhancement requests for fiscal year 2021. And now I'll stop for questions on fiscal year 2021.
Any questions, committee? Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Help me out on that shrinkage deal. That still sounded kind of.
Yes. For those who couldn't hear the question, he asked for more clarification on shrinkage, and it is, yes, a very complicated idea. So once again, the basic definition is if you take the amount that the agency would spend if every position was filled all year, and then you subtract the amount the agency saves from vacant positions and turnover. So, you know, the gap, if someone leaves, it might be a month or 2 before you hire someone else. So you save a little bit of money in that time. That difference, that money saving is shrinkage. And so when the governor asked the agency to have a 5% shrinkage rate, she's basically asking them to not fill a vacant position to equal 5% savings-ish. Is that better? Oh, good. Oh, good. Sorry, but does that answer your question? No?
I understand.
The words, yeah.
Representative Hahn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Quick question on page 9, under the commodities section. Do we have a line item on how much was spent on radio frequency ID wands for the animal ID program? Animal health program?
I can get that. It's on my computer, but I can get that for you, yes.
Perfect. And do you know much about that program, or probably not? Is that a question for someone else in the room?
I can tell you basically what a wand does, but the animal health program I'd probably leave to the agency. Do you want me to tell you what a wand does? Or
No, I'm actually familiar with RFID. I don't agree with it, but I'm familiar with it. And so I'm curious to know if how much we were spending on those.
I'll find out for you.
Perfect,
If the
thanks.
agency doesn't answer.
did the Ag Department receive any CARES dollars?
Yes, so on at the bottom of page 9, at the very bottom, where the governor discusses that food stability assistance, 2.8 million, that's CARES money. And then if you turn the page to page 10, that 212,000 for PPE and communication services, that is also CARES money, so that adds to about $3 million. Yep. Okay. I'll move on to fiscal year 2022 if you're ready. And that is on page 11. On page 11, looking underneath the box, the agency requests 2022 expenditures of $51.5 million, including $9.9 million SGF. This is an all funds decrease of $4.3 million and a state general fund increase of $73,000 from the 2021 revised estimate. I'll start with that state general fund increase of $73,000. It's mostly just due to increased contributions to CAPERS and payments for group health insurance. And to talk about that all funds decrease, we'll turn the page to page 12. On page 12, that paragraph that starts at the top of the page, that's contractual services, and that all funds decrease is primarily due to a lack of reappropriation. So you'll remember in fiscal year 2021, there was an increase of 2.8 million in rollover funds. Well, those aren't in fiscal year 2022, so that there's going to be a decrease in 2022 compared to 2021. And again, you'll see that in other assistance, that last bullet on page 12, same thing. And looking at the paragraph on the last paragraph on page 12, the governor recommends fiscal year 2022 expenditures of $48.8 million, including $9.8 million state general fund. This is an all funds decrease of $2.8 million and a state general fund decrease of $990,000 below the agency's 2022 request. That decrease of $2.8 million is caused by 3 things. So first, the governor did not recommend the agency's enhancement requests, and we'll talk about those on the next page. Second, the governor recommended the agency's reduced resources budget, which we'll also talk about in the next couple of pages. And finally, again, the governor recommended a 5% shrinkage rate for the agency, like we talked about in 2021. So turning the page to page 13, we'll talk about those enhancement requests. The agency requests three enhancements totaling $925,000, all from the State Water Plan Fund. $450,000 for watershed dam construction, $225,000 for the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program to retire water rights, $250,000 for stream bank stabilization, and once again, the governor did not recommend any of those enhancements. And finally, turning the page to page 14. Page 14 lays out the agency's reduced resources package. So that totals $990,000 from the state general fund. And the bullets underneath on page 14 and continue on to page 15 break out those reduced resources. So as a reminder, reduced resources, the governor asked agencies that receive state general fund to reduce their budget by 10% for fiscal year 2022. And this package is the proposal of things that would get the agency to that 10% reduction. And the governor did recommend that the Department of Agriculture implement their reduced resources budget. So basically their budget has been reduced by 10%. Their state general fund budget, just to make sure, their state general fund budget has been reduced by 10%. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for questions on fiscal year 2022 or the Department of Agriculture's budget as a whole.
Ready? Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm tracking with you. That 10% reduction was just what they get from the SGF,
Yes, just state general fund.
not the total,
Correct.
because we do not want to decrease their total. Not in this. We'll talk about that later. Thank you.
Mr. Beam?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With your permission, I was just going to hit a few highlights of the year, and some of it may reference directly the budget, and then let our CFO, Kellen Leaps, go into more detail, including the extra handout that we provided that would be a supplement to what legislative research provided. But I always, when I get a chance to visit with groups, like to brag about Kansas agriculture and remind folks it is. If you look at the 71 sectors in Kansas, of 530 sectors, adding those 71 sectors, it's nearly a $50 billion impact, and reduced or induced and indirect, it adds up to $70 billion, and about 13% of the state's employees are related to those 71 sectors. So just like everyone in Kansas, and just like our farmers and ranchers, the stress of the pandemic, everybody was affected by that. We tried to address it in several fronts. One, we had somebody at the Division of Emergency Management daily for all meetings and calls, and continue to participate in those and help respond to questions and inquiries from locals about issues that may be related to agriculture. And then we had weekly calls there for, I think, about 8 of them with all kinds of stakeholders, including our USDA partners, just to touch base. We did not, most of our workers, went to remote mode. A lot of them work remote. You'll see later that, as much as, I think, about half of our employees work outside of the headquarters in Manhattan. A lot of them work out of their homes, so it was not a big change for them. But we tried to do what we could to help the stakeholders and the customers keep moving through business. We did back off of some inspections there for a while in the spring, and then again later in the fall. The one area that we never missed a beat on, in fact, we increased our participation all through the pandemic, was our meat and poultry inspection crew. We have approximately 90 plants in Kansas that are state licensed, therefore inspected by our meat and poultry staff, and if they're not a custom plant, they can't operate unless inspectors there. So our folks were there, and ironically, as I go into some detail, about the same time, with food being, in some cases, hard to get at grocery stores, a lot of consumers were looking locally, and many of the local plants, they saw their business increase substantially almost overnight. Our records show for 2020, not counting October, November, December, the output from the small state-inspected plants is up 23% for the year. And most of that happened starting in April. So that shows you the amount of activity at those local processing plants. So that kind of stimulated the opportunity when the CARES money come to Kansas, is that we worked with the Department of Commerce in crafting a program that was called Securing Local Foods Grant Program. It's just shy of $12 million. So it may be hard to track through this budget process because it was a joint effort with Commerce. The first roughly $8 million was handled by Commerce. They had the contract with the grantees. We collaborated with them on the structure of the program and who the grantees, selected those grantees. And then as we got in towards the end of the year, they asked us to go ahead and administer all of the grants. So we had about 12 people as case managers that worked with over 254 grantees. And then a little over $2 million of it actually came out the door probably in November to those grantees from our office. So this went, there is a one-pager that I provided yesterday, the Full House Appropriations Committee, that breaks out the categories of these grants, but there were 55 slaughter and processing facilities that received $4.5 million. There were direct-to-consumer, which would be producer, growers, and vendors. They received, 79 of those received $2.9 million. There was dairy, food, and meat processing that received $1.7 million. 26 grocery stores received a little over $1 million. 54 food bank pantries and soup kitchens received just shy of $1 million. Farmers markets, $162,000. So the money went to 80 individuals in 80 counties for that purpose, and it was quite rewarding, to be honest, to be able to provide some assistance to up the capacity and the new equipment for these local plants that probably would not have been available with any other time. So in addition to that, I mean, there was like another example would be a church in Kansas City. They used the funds to develop a community kitchen. There were specialty crop farmers able to put in a new water system. A local grocery store in southeast Kansas used it to provide an online ordering and delivery to serve in the community. And then several food banks and food pantries, as I mentioned earlier. But I was really proud. We had at least 12 of our employees starting in November took over the casework for those 250-plus people, took that on in extra duties of what they normally do and walked them through. At that time, it looked like, the money had to be spent by December 31. There's different interpretations of what that meant, but it was a lot of stress for the grantees and stress for our folks, but I think you'll find a lot of these in the community that have really benefited from it. I would also say that it wasn't only a human pandemic. We had unusual amount of animal disease issues to handle in 2020. We had fascicular stomatitis, which is technically a foreign animal disease, but we had 270 investigations with 102 premises quarantined in 26 counties. Worked through that with individuals, mostly horses, but on occasionally the cattle would get the disease as well. And the last thing I would say is that in October of 2019, we launched the website, kansasagstress.org. It's not our content. We just worked with partners in trying to identify useful resources that people might want to go to. And we had, as you'll see, we had over 2,500 website visits in 2020. That may not seem, I mean, a lot of people were just checking it out, but I think what's interesting to me is the time that they were on averaged over 18 minutes. So you can only imagine how long you stay on websites. If it averaged 18 minutes, there was a good number of people that spent considerable time on it. So I'll stop there, respond to any questions, and then hopefully leave time for Kellen to dive in more detail on our budget.
Committee, any questions? Representative Hahn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much for coming to testify for us today. I just wanted to commend you on these local processors and supporting these local processors. And part of your staff, a couple of folks from your staff came to visit me yesterday in the office. And since you're a captive audience here, I'm just going to take my liberty to say that I think that whatever we can do to promote these local processors, I've said it here, I think it was yesterday, if the pandemic did anything, it was good. It was to show us that, hey, food security is national security. So if there's anything that I can help do to even help foster some of these programs in our high schools, I'd love to see shop programs coming back to our schools and teaching some of these hands-on, real-world things like meat processing, for instance, because not a lot of people are doing it, and now we're scrambling trying to get meat processors. So would love to see something coming from your department to really get us back on track, to try to take away some of that monopoly from the 4 major packers that we have right now.
And I might add, one of the things that come out of our Ag Growth Summit, which would be all sectors, was that we need to continue to offer what they call immersion opportunities. In other words, introduce youth or anyone not familiar with ag expose them to the opportunities, because if you look at all the sectors in ag, especially on technology and ag equipment dealers are scrambling to get people to go into that field, and can be a very good occupation. So we're going to try to continue to focus on helping provide experience and exposure, and be certain, happy to work with you on that. And the one thing I might add about the local foods and what went to the local locker and meat plants, what that also has enabled is individual farmers and ranchers diversifying and trying to sell direct, market and brand their own products, and it's really difficult for them to do the processing. So if they can team up with a local processor who now may have more capacity to do so, it's going to also help them.
Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So farmers markets, are those inside of Department of Ag also?
We do have a registered farmers market and do a lot of outreach with them.
So in my district, farmers markets are they're growing exponentially, especially in Geary County. We appreciate all that you've done on that, and we are really looking forward to doing even more and bigger things. Promoting healthy eating and being able to grow those specialty crops, sell them direct to consumer. Boy, it's a big deal. I'm working with a group right now on how we can introduce more healthy eating into those young people that don't even know what vegetables are. So, and we appreciate it.
We should chat more about that. I'd like to learn.
Yeah.
Representative Hahn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a tag to that, what I'm also seeing is that there's a resurgence of people growing their own food, chickens, raw milk, and I know that there's been some parameters against people marketing that raw milk. Just my 2 cents is we should be making it easier for farmers and ranchers to sell direct to the public instead of making it harder for them. That's my comment. Secondly, a quick question about your foreign animal disease. Do we know, was that traced back, how we were able to get, especially in the cattle, how were we able to get that foreign disease here?
Well, the vesicular stomatitis, it kind of moves around geographically. Last year, Colorado had lots of cases of it, and we didn't have a single case. We've always had, or not always, but it's not uncommon to have a few. But this year, it popped up, and if you look at the map where these cases came from, it seemed to kind of follow waterways, so we believe that it maybe has always been there, but conditions got right so that it kind of moved up through the waterways in that south central area.
Okay, thank you. And last thing, Mr. Chair, how are those producers selected to receive those that CARES money that you mentioned?
We put together a grant application, and it was very straightforward. You know, here are the parameters to meet the eligibility requirements of the CARES Act. How would you use the funds, and how much would you use in different categories? And then we took a handful of those and shared those with redacting the names and locations, and shared it with our Board of Ag to see if we're on the right track and kind of compared scores. And then we circulated within our agency and redacted all the names and locations and scored them. And then we just took the dollars and went down. We actually got a bump in money, you know, from the Office of Recovery, so we were able to go deeper twice, I think, into that list.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for everything you do and your staff does to stand on the line for farmers and ranchers. We appreciate you very much.
Thank you.
Representative Garber.
Thank you, and I agree with her. You're doing a good job. Appreciate it. The industrial hemp, you mentioned that you gave a summary report to the Ag Committee. Is there any way I can get a copy of that?
Absolutely.
PDF would be fine. I don't care.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We can do that.
All right, thank you.
And then if you have any questions afterward, we'd be glad to visit with you.
Mike, I have a question. Oh, excuse me. On the list that Victoria was talking about, was the stream bank stabilization and some other conservation groups pulled out of your budget? Or the governor's budget?
Well, Kellen probably should respond, but all of those water plan monies those are essentially start with the recommendations by the Water Authority. And we get assignments on some of those programs because our Division of Conservation has handled those in the past. So the Water Authority make a recommendation, then the governor, of course, accepts, modifies, makes the governor's recommendation, then you react to it. So there was quite a bit of holdover because during the pandemic, you know, a lot of the local conservation district offices were closed. A lot of these projects take, you know, some engineering and plans to prepare them. So we left a lot of stream bank plans on the shelf because we just weren't able to process them. So that's why you're going to see a pretty good-sized carryover.
Representative Newland?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You took the words out of my mouth and all on these programs and all, because I sure don't want to see any funding pulled from those programs and all. We've made so many strides in getting a lot of this work started, and I can't foresee taking a step backwards and all of that.
Kellen may provide a little more clarification on that.
That'd be
And
fine.
when she's up here, if that's all right.
Yeah, I appreciate all your work.
Okay, thank you.
All right, good job.
Thank you.
Wait a minute. Right. Okay. Representative Carter would like you to stick around a little bit after she gives her presentation. Oh, Representative Howard?
I have a simple request. Could you give us a breakdown of your 12 million in the CARES Act says that they're earmarked for expanded capacity? So we could see how those monies were earmarked and spent, please?
Yeah, I'll show you a page that breaks it out by category like I verbally went over.
I was
if that
looking for
helps.
category and by manufacturer, both.
I'll share with what we have. I mean, I think we can answer your question.
Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, Chairman Corbett and members of the committee. I am going to be as brief as humanly possible because I'm sure there are additional questions for the secretary. And I also think that Victoria did an exemplary job, and most of the time she does my job, so I probably don't even need to stand here. But as she stated, our adjusted 21 and 22 budget does include a 10% SGF reduction. We have also incorporated the governor's recommendation and request for the 5% shrinkage, which is an odd word, but as she very eloquently explained, it's from leaving positions open or attrition, retirements, things of that nature. So we've gone ahead and included that in our budget recommendation. Our agency, we have 343 authorized employees. That doesn't necessarily mean we have 343 people on any given day, but those are our authorized employees. And as Secretary Beam stated, we have a very high level of field staff. We have over 180 field staff that are covering all 105 counties on a daily basis. So we also have a very active vehicle fleet that's out in the state all the time. Just a little bit of flavor on our state general fund. Historically, we've received about $10 million in SGF. In fiscal year 20, we received about $9.85 million. Because of the 10% SGF reduction and the shrinkage, we'll be down to about the $9 million level by fiscal year 22. So that just gives you kind of the environment that we're working in and trying to incorporate into our budgets. Most of the changes from fiscal year 21 to 22, I think Victoria gave all of the very important high levels. We won't have COVID funding going into fiscal year 22, hopefully, as well as we're spending a decent amount of state water plan carryover funds in 21, and I'll also try to answer some of the state water plan questions that have been brought up here. From a 30,000 level view of our agency, we have 6 different divisions, 15 separate programs. And so we have given you guys a 35-page novel that you can take home with you and look at while you're in front of your fireplace this weekend I won't take the time to go through all of that. What I will do is I will actually have you turn to conservation, which is on page 9. And I think that might allay a lot of the questions that we do have here today in committee. You see at the end of fiscal year 20, that program had about $3.7 million in carryover. That is a combination of state water plan, fee funds, and a couple federal funds that they have. About 2.2 million of that was state water plan funds. So going into this year, we're spending a high level of carryover. The reduction that Victoria talked about, it's not a line item reduction. It was enhancement packages that we put forward because they were recommended by the Kansas Water Authority, which technically we're going back to the baseline budget. So it's not crossing out any line item in our budget and reducing it. It's going back to that historical baseline average, just to give a little bit of flavor about that. But we're also spending, or we're trying to spend a fair amount of those carryover funds to take care of those contracts and get funds on the ground for those different projects that we weren't able to accomplish in fiscal year 20 due to COVID and other extenuating circumstances. And as Victoria also stated, we're receiving a little over $820,000 from the Water Office in a transfer for the Kansas Reservoir Protection Initiative program. So we're also seeing an influx in some of those funds to carry out some of that work. And so with that, I won't belabor going through all of our different programs. I'm sure if you have any specific questions, you'll let either the secretary or I know, and either the secretary or I would be more than happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Arlen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. While we're on that thought of the enhancements that were not funded, and you did a beautiful job of explaining that. It took me a long time to figure that out in this committee. But I noticed on page 9, the stream bank stabilization line item under the 20 fund analysis. So it says 820,000 carryover. I want to just talk about that line, since that was one of the enhancements that we didn't receive. Can you kind of put that in a picture for us?
I will do my best to try and give it an understanding of that. So for all of our state water plan funds, we do have the carryover or rollover authority. And so I like to say that there's new money or old money. So you can see what was spent out of that budgeted fund in fiscal year 20. But the carryover also might include some of those prior year state water plan funds that would be unencumbered or weren't spent and go back to that mother fund to be reappropriated or to be given back in contracts. That stream bank stabilization program, we had some timing issues with COVID in 20. And due to that and some program management changes, we weren't able to get a lot of those contracts on the ground last year. But that's why we have $820,000 in carryover. You won't necessarily be able to take the income and expenses from fiscal year 20 to get it to equal that carryover, because there's also prior fiscal year funds that have been returned back to that fund from prior canceled contracts or other funds that were available in that fund source.
And if I just might follow up and just comment, that has been one of the areas that I've always been concerned about, was whether we were taking, sometimes it seems like it's one of those that we cut a little bit or don't fund fully, but are we expecting to be able to utilize most of that? Or, those projects will happen if we're able health-wise to do that this year?
What I can say, it is one of the top areas of priority for that program. And so that it is of the utmost importance to try and get some of those funds on the ground for that project, for that program and for those projects, because of we were aware of that carryover funding and getting that great funding source out.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Newland?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, thank you. Just to follow up a little bit on that, are we having problems not only on the stream bank stabilization, but on filter strips and those types of conservation programs? Are we having a hard time getting people involved and getting those programs implemented?
So those would traditionally fall under our water resources or non-point source programs. Not being intimately involved in that program, since those are a cooperative effort with those local conservation districts, I haven't personally heard that we're having a hard time getting people signed up for those programs, but I might defer that one to Secretary Beam if he's heard anything specific otherwise.
It's my recollection that it varies county to county. If you've got a pretty active district director and a board of supervisors, the money they'll tend to utilize their allotment first. And so towards the end of the fiscal year, which we're in the process of doing now, and the Conservation Commission reviewed it, I think it was Monday, we're reallocating those funds back out because if they didn't get them encumbered, there's other counties that can use them. So it ebbs and flows. But I would tell you the stream bank stabilization, it's my understanding we probably have more applicants that are ready to go than we have funds. So if we can just get the manpower and get the contracts and the contractors out, we should be able to make big strides.
Representative Baker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So a couple of questions. Number one, I think you did a great job in the presentations. So my friends on the Ag Committee had a little heartburn yesterday as we heard about the Quivira situation. Can you shed a little light on that and where we stand and what the liabilities are?
Yeah, I think probably a lot of you may be aware there's been a long issue with a water right that U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service owns, 1957, high priority, high senior water right for the Quivira Wildlife Refuge. A lot of junior water rights are owned by and used by irrigators. So there's been ongoing discussions over the years about how to resolve that. But an agreement was reached between the Department of Interior, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the local groundwater management district this past summer on how to resolve that long-term and not ask the chief engineer to reduce junior water rights. What's recently happened is there's been a lawsuit filed. We haven't been served yet, but we've seen the petition. And the plaintiff is Audubon of Kansas. The defendants include Department of Interior, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, me on behalf of the Department of Ag, and Earl Lewis as chief engineer. So we're defendants. My legal counsel says to say as little as possible since we are defendants. But I would say before this committee, if you want to provide some help and assistance in our defense, we probably need some outside counsel on this. So, one of the things we've been talking internally is perhaps the $30,000 that would be available for both fiscal year 21 and 22 that we could have to help us in that defense. I kind of took it off and ran with it, but.
So, thank you on that. So, we're an ag state. I mean, this is our bread and butter. And when I see this budget come in with less money in it, and I hear these, I've got to remember these terms. That is really, somebody stayed up late thinking that up. I'm not interested in those reductions. And if we need $30,000 to make sure that we're staying out of a lawsuit and we have the best defense, we definitely need to put that in there. This is the bread and butter of the state of Kansas. We have to have ag. We are an ag state. I'm sitting here looking at the age of these vehicles. That looks like something I'd drive. We don't want to put state employees in a 90,000-mile, 6-year-old vehicle. I mean, we need to step it up here. And I appreciate the austerity in your budget and everybody trying to save $1, but you do not save your way to prosperity. You invest your way to prosperity. So with that being said, and I know we're conservative, as a matter of fact, some of us are cheap, but I want to take and make sure that we have the Department of Ag as the A team. So if it's $30,000 you need for your defense, yeah, no problem. But I think we need to talk about the rest of the budget too sometime. Thank you.
Representative Hahn?
With all due respect, if you were to talk to some of the farmers and rangers in my district, they would say They can drive those old pickups, that's just fine. We drive those old pickups and we get along just fine. But I do agree with you. If we need money to be able, for you all to be able to play in federal court and win, just win. We'll give you the money, just win.
Mike, have you contacted the Attorney General? Is he going to be any help to you on this at all?
You know, our council has talked to the Attorney General's office, and they've had some conversation. Basically, the Attorney General's his office has said, if you want us to do this, you know, let us know formally. But internally, we felt like with our expertise, our legal expertise in water, that it makes sense, since we're a defendant, that we do it. But that's up to discussion.
Hahn?
Mr. Speaker, I move that, it was 30,000? I move that if we, no? Not time to do that? All right. Do you have this in a electronic format? Can you send this to us in an electronic format?
Yeah, there's nothing down, but we can put it down, get it to you.
Yeah, I'd love to be able to.
And I can't really make a lot of comment about the lawsuit right now, but I can.
Nope,
I can mention that lawsuit.
I'm sure you probably sent this to the printer, so if you have an electronic format to send, I sure would like to see this electronically.
On that subject? Oh, I see. Oh, sure, sure, absolutely.
Committee, do you have any questions for either one of these presenters today? Representative Carlin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to just have you touch on the hemp you talked about in the Appropriations Committee the other day. Could you just give us that little scenario about the research being over and, you know, that little piece?
Okay, we're starting year 3 of hemp being legal to grow in Kansas. The first 2 years, which would be the 2019 and 2020 growing season, was all done under research. So individuals could apply to our agency and get a permit to grow hemp under research, and it had to have some type of research component to it. The 2018 Farm Bill passed and made hemp legal as a crop, but states had to make application to USDA to get approval for their program. So we submitted in the 2020 legislature, I believe it was, or 2019 legislature, gave us approval to go forth with a commercial program and apply. So we basically took the program that you passed, put it in regulation, gave it to USDA, and then they gave approval to us, I think, around late last year. We started the process. We've got rules and regulations. They are now effective, so we now have a program that's a commercial program. You still have to be licensed, and the application period just started. I think we probably have, last I knew, we had about 10 applicants, but historically, a lot of the applicants come in at the end, which will be at the end of March. I don't remember, that report I'm going to provide to you shows the acreage and acreage harvested. We were down in acres harvested this year, and some of that was due to drought in western Kansas. So I think the economics of it have been mixed. We have proven, our farmers have proven they can grow it. We got to make sure that there's a market for it, and if the market's there, they'll respond. But K-State's soon announce another phase of their research project. Might be some interesting data that would shed light on this. Does that help?
Well, I just thought it was appropriate to put it in this committee, a little bit about it, since, you know, it's a big deal. We had over 300 applications that first year, right? And so we have like 10 now. So, you know, I don't know.
We'll have, yeah, I think we'll probably have, I'd be surprised if we don't have at least 100. I mean, they'll come in later. But I think I just should provide the report. It's a 3-page report, and just provide it to you so all the committee can have it.
Yeah, I think that would be great because, you know, it was a big deal, and some people are new, and kind of give an overview of that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Committee, any other questions? Mike, good job.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee.
There are no further questions. We're going to close the hearing on the Department of Ag budget. Have a cold weekend. We're adjourned. Well, Joe?